Hello everyone, and welcome to the flipped collaborative for assignment 2, Understanding Indigenous Education and Perspectives, assignment 2 case study. This assignment is 2,000 words and it's worth 60% of your overall mark, due in week 8. Now that's the last week of the teaching period. So I just wanted to highlight here that it's going to be very challenging to provide any extensions for this assignment, as the next teaching period pretty much starts straight away. So please keep that in mind at this early stage. The assignment is asking you to work in a team, which I will be allocating in the discussion boards, and I will provide information on that alongside this. You're going to review and respond to a fictional case study, which you'll find below, on the Bunjalaki College in order to create a digital artifact. So your digital artifact really includes any piece of work that provides information and research to address what this assignment is asking for. So I really would steer away from any sort of video recording, because you can't show your referencing with citations, but any form of report, just research, presentation that you'd like to provide for this assignment is absolutely fine. Some examples you could include in your digital artifact in a way to incorporate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into the education at the school in the case study. So you can do a whole school approach where you'd be talking about things that are done in the whole school. So you could have some celebrations of, days that are linked to Indigenous perspectives and national days of celebrating and acknowledging Indigenous Australians. You could talk about acknowledgement of country, do a smoking ceremony, talk about things that you are going to present in common areas of the school, professional development for all teachers. So there's things you could include in a whole school approach. You could talk about a program that links to the community. So you may focus from the perspective of one classroom or the whole school, where you're developing links to the community, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, inviting them in, inviting elders in, and integrating that into your learning and embedding the Indigenous perspectives. You could provide a unit of work, sort of like a resource that could be used within different classrooms. And when it says with a focus on place-based pedagogical approaches, we're talking about using the pedagogy that's typical of or linked to the land where you're learning from. For example, possum skin pedagogy is only relevant in Victoria. So all that means is just use the pedagogies that are appropriate to where you're living, learning and working. So the unit of work would be like a resource, like a teacher's resource that you could share between different classrooms. Or you could just include a resource that would be used as a guide to embedding Indigenous perspective in schools with the links to local community events. It's quite broad here, so I feel that within these 4 points, there's a lot of scope of what you could do for this assignment. So have a read there and talk to your teammates and see what you feel you have the most knowledge of or you'd like to research more about. The case studies here, so you'll find that in the assignment, you just click on that and that'll give you information about the context for this particular assignment. In your artifact, depending on what type of artifact you choose to include and create, you need to demonstrate knowledge of context, innovation and ethical approaches to working in partnerships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. This means you need to be respectful of what they can offer. You need to acknowledge that they're traditional custodians. You need to incorporate their accuracy into what you're teaching. So remember, if you invite an elder into the classroom, they're not taking on that teaching role. They're just working alongside the teachers. So when we invite community members in to the classroom. They're not taking over the lesson. They're just helping you with your authenticity to make sure that you're teaching the correct perspective of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, histories and languages. You need to demonstrate critical understanding of the ways to develop these community school relationships. So there's quite a lot. You can really think outside the box or critically to work out how you're going to create those communications and relationships with Indigenous community members. I've mentioned before, you can go to council. Some areas you'll find it easier. So if you're in a city, sometimes it's difficult. Rural areas, sometimes it's easier. That said, many councils have Indigenous education leaders. Many schools have Indigenous education support workers. So it really depends where you are, and every situation will be unique, but really think about the best way to develop those relationships in a critical and respectful way. You also want to include an overview of the approaches you've used in partnerships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. So as I was saying, there's a whole range of ways to engage the community. You could do a whole school approach, a classroom approach where you invite elders in or parents in or siblings in to support the learning you're doing. There's no, right or wrong here. It really is what works within your community, within your school, within your classroom. Always seek advice, support and accuracy where possible from community members to ensure that you're teaching in a respectful and accurate way. The final thing you want to do is you need to include analysis of the place of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures within the Australian curriculum. So you could talk about maybe something specific that you wanted to include here that links to a content descriptor in the cross-curriculum priorities. So this is where we're talking about place-based pedagogy. So you want the context. So to connect to Indigenous students in your class, to connect them to the land they're living on, their traditional land, you need to include the land that you are on as a school and a classroom. And if you're not currently, this is fictitious, if you're not in a school currently, so you can use the traditional custodian land where you live. And then you need to use critical thinking to investigate complex local and global issues which would impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education. So here you might mention things where some of those things that we talked about in assignment 1, which have been impactful and harmful and difficult to move forwards in terms of education and state and federal policies in embedding those Indigenous perspectives, and think about potential solutions to that problem. Again, a little bit like the recommendations you did for assignment 1. So include an introduction of some form. So remember, this won't be an essay, that won't work with a team assignment, but you can just include a piece of research and make sure you address all the criteria set out below. So if you scroll down further, the assignment criteria is here, and that's what you'll directly be working from within your team. So we will be having a live session, but I feel assignment is quite broad, and this is just to provide you with an overview of what you will be looking for. If you're not quite sure on the digital artifact you've chosen, please just shoot me an email and I can just talk you through it just to ensure it's okay. I know working with other students can be difficult in terms of finding times that you have times to study at the same time, with family and work commitments, it can be difficult. So let's all try and support each other and understand that we all have different commitments. And I think that this is really going to be a fantastic assignment to research with a lot of really beneficial ideas that are going to help you when you are a teacher in a classroom, in a school. I hope this was helpful, everybody, and I'm looking forward to discussing this assignment further with you. Thanks, everybody.